What's up everyone, this is John with Skate Better, and today we are reviewing the Deathwish deck. So, welcome back to the channel. As you may or may not have noticed, I'm actually living in a new space now. It's a much better space for my life. It's just bigger for me and my wife. And it's also across the street from a really nice flat ground session space, which is pretty cool. So anywho, I've been in a little bit of transition. I am gonna continue to do reviews. I haven't fell off completely. It's just been busy for me with work and everything else. But I did want to finally review this Deathwish deck that I was skating for quite some time to give you all an idea of what it was like. I also want to apologize in advance for any sort of like weird lighting or sound things that might be happening in this video. This is the first one I'm doing in the new space, so I just don't know how it's gonna go, and I'm experimenting a little, but hopefully it goes well. So the first question is always, why did I buy the Deathwish deck? It's pretty simple. I mentioned this in the setup, but I just really love the team. I've heard really good things about the deck. I'm definitely glad I tried it. It was not my favorite deck, and I'll get into those reasons later, but I'm definitely glad that I tried the deck, and I understand why a lot of people really love Deathwish. So, the measurements of this deck, I'm gonna go over one more time really quick. So the deck is an 8.475, the length is a 31.875, so just under 32, and then it has a shorter wheelbase of 14.25. That actually meant quite a bit when I was using the deck. The biggest thing that I wanna mention is that this deck does not feel like an 8.4 or an 8.5. It really did feel like an 8.38. I would almost say it was even closer to like an 8.3 or maybe even an 8.25. That's just what it felt like to me. I think the reason that it feels that way, it's two reasons. Number one, a lot of the decks I've been skating lately have a really big fuller nose and tail, and this one doesn't necessarily have that. And number two, this deck actually has a really good amount of concave, specifically in these areas I'll talk about later. But I think when I'm skating a flatter deck, it just, in a fuller shape, it just feels bigger, which kind of makes sense. So I'm just saying, if you do get a Deathwish deck and it says it's an 8.4 or an 8 point something, know that it is gonna absolutely feel more like an 8.38 than it will an 8.5, and even maybe closer, a little bit less than that for whatever reason. That's what I experienced. So next thing I wanna talk about is the shape of this deck. And first, just wanna talk about the concave and the pitch. So it actually had a reasonable pitch. Not quite as much as the Enjoy I'm skating now, or maybe like the Zero that I've skated in the past, but it has a very reasonable nose pitch. So I would say higher than average nose pitch, and then I would say slightly average, maybe a tiniest bit slightly more than average tail pitch. So this thing was getting off the ground. Like getting it up high off the ground was not an issue. And once again, I would say that it has a really good amount of concave. Just to give you comparison, I'm gonna pull the Zero deck behind me. So hopefully you can kind of see how it stacks up. Once again, pretty average pitch in the tail. And then this Zero also had a reasonable amount of pitch in the nose, and I would say the Deathwish even had more. It looks like to me, it looks like it has a little bit more pitch in the nose than even the Zero. And then once again, lots of concave like the Zero as well. I will go grab a flat deck really quick so you can see what that looks like. All right, so this is the Weekend deck that I was just skating not too long ago. And as you can see, definitely significantly more concave. So the Weekend's a lot flatter straight across, and then of course the Deathwish has this decent amount of concave. What I would say is most decks that have concave, I find it's pretty much an even spread usually across here. But with this deck, which was even more interesting, is I felt like less concave in the middle, and then it got more and more concave as you get towards the nose and towards the tail. I love that for kickflips. Like my kickflips felt really fast on this deck. But then for some of the other tricks, I kind of had to get used to it a little bit. But overall, this particular deck had more concave than I'm used to, and I would say a little bit more than I would personally prefer. Next I want to talk about is the nose and tail shape of this deck. Deathwish is a sister or brother company to Baker. Most people I think know that. And I would say that the nose and tail are actually very similar to a Baker shape. It's not quite this super full nose like the Weekend deck here, just for comparison so you can see. The Weekend deck definitely has a slightly fuller, little bit more of a shovel nose. The Deathwish has a little bit more of a concave. And then if we look at the tails, same thing. I would say the Weekend is very, very similar, but maybe the slightest bit more full. And then the Deathwish seems to have seems to start its taper a little bit earlier than the weekend deck. So once again, a little bit more of a tapered tail. I wouldn't say it's tapered by any means. I would actually say it's just an average normal tail shape. And then the trend I think that I'm seeing now in decks is they're going more for fuller tails and fuller noses, or at least maybe it's just what I prefer, so that's what I'm seeing. Next thing I want to talk about is the graphics on this deck. So graphics, I would say like 10 out of 10. I love these graphics. They actually lasted a reasonable amount of time. And what was cool was there were like 2 layers. So there was like a gold foil that ran all the way through the deck. If I was like barely starting to chip away, I don't know if you can see that, but like barely little scratches, it would actually be gold underneath, which I thought was really cool. And then once you got through the gold layer, then you had like this wood. But the gold wasn't just here, it was actually a layer that ran all the way through, and I thought that was like the coolest thing. You can even maybe see a little bit of it in the scratch here. I thought that was awesome. The graphics off definitely lasted as well. So like some decks I get it and it's like immediately they're just gone. 1-2 board slides. This one I was able to put through a good amount before it really started to wear down to the wood, so that was awesome. Next thing I want to talk about is the durability and the pop of this deck. So as I said, it's a little bit more of a compact shape because it's a little bit shorter than a 32, and the wheelbase also brings it a little bit more. So actually, despite the fact that it had a lot of concave, which would make it feel like less control, the fact that it was more compact gave me a good amount of control. Also, the pop felt really crispy in this deck, so it did feel almost as crispy as the weekend, and I would say maybe on point with the Enjoy deck that I'm skating now, but good amount of pop, and it felt like it had kind of like a fat, like thick amount of like wood in the tail. I don't know if that makes sense, but some decks I skate and it feels like it's snappy and thin, but this one felt like it was a little bit more meaty, like had a little bit more thickness to the pop, if that makes any sense. And then coming to durability, this deck really lasted. I would say it's up there with some of the most durable decks I've skated. So I'm not just talking about pop, I'm talking about like dinging it into things, shoving it into walls. I don't actually think I have a single chip in this deck all the way around. I don't actually. So normally at every single deck I skate, at some point I ding it and I get like a chip in the nose or the tail for whatever reason. And trust me, I still zing this one around, but it was like a beast. So once again, if you want a deck that's really durable, I've heard that Deathwish decks hold up in the past. My Baker deck is also one of the most durable decks that I've skated, and I highly recommend those as beginner decks. And I would say Deathwish is a pretty solid go-to as well. But the only difference, for whatever reason, I would say the pop felt a little bit meatier. And once again, if you know what I'm talking about, cool. If not, you can almost say it's like a sound. Like some sounds, a snap sounds different than like a meteor kind of sound. So it was one of those. Anyway, my last thing, general pros and cons. Would I try a Deathwish deck again? I think if I could find one that had a mellow concave, absolutely. I think particularly if I was gonna like huck down things or do gap skating, a wider Deathwish with like a really mellow concave would work really well for that because it's got that meaty kind of feel. It's super durable. I didn't really talk about the weight of this deck, but I would say it was slightly on the heavier side for an 838. Actually, I'm gonna go ahead and say it's on the heavier side. I've skated 8.5s that I promise you it feel lighter than this deck. And I even had someone at the skate park, like I forget, I was just letting them try it or something, and they were like, man, your deck feels so heavy. And it definitely felt a little bit heavier than other decks. So I guess I would chalk that up and say maybe that was one of the only cons of this deck, was just it definitely felt a little bit heavier weight-wise. So I don't know why that is. And maybe that attributes to the fact that it felt a little bit meatier too. But anyways, durability-wise, it goes. I'm gonna leave my thoughts there. I only left clips in the beginning because those are pretty much the only ones I could salvage in my phone. I hope you all really enjoyed this video. I will continue to do reviews. I have the on-delay bearings that I'm doing. I'm skating some Nike SBs, but they're in a suede instead of a leather like I have in the past. And a couple other things I'll be reviewing soon. So just know I haven't gone anywhere. I appreciate you all for sticking around. If you did like this review, please like, subscribe, and comment. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see y'all next time. Take care.